Welcome, everyone. This devotional is brought to you by the You Need Faith in Jesus team, and today we are diving deep into Genesis chapter 21, a really powerful story about God's promises and the conflicts that can come with them.
So, have you ever been there? You get the very thing you've been praying for, and then a whole new set of challenges pops up? That's the core tension we're going to see unfold. The story kicks off with an amazing miracle, but it gets into some really difficult, messy, real-life conflict fast.
All right, let's jump right in. We start with the absolute climax of a promise that Abraham and Sarah waited decades for. This is the moment that changes everything, the birth of Isaac.
Now listen to the language here, as he had said, as he had spoken, at the set time. You see that? The text is hammering home a crucial point. God's faithfulness is absolute. He did exactly what he said he would do, right on schedule. This was a divine appointment. And the name they give him, Isaac, actually means laughter. Just think about that for a second. The very thing that once symbolized their doubt, remember Sarah laughing at the idea of having a baby? God completely transforms it into pure, holy joy. It's just incredible.
And Sarah gets it. Her joy isn't meant to be kept to herself. She says, God made me laugh, and now everyone who hears about this is going to laugh with me. Her personal miracle was designed to become this big communal testimony.
But, just as this long-awaited joy arrives, boom, conflict. And this isn't just some sibling rivalry, folks. What's about to happen reveals a deep, deep spiritual truth about faith versus our own human efforts.
So, Sarah sees Ishmael mocking Isaac. Now, that word right there is loaded. This isn't just kids being kids. In fact, the Apostle Paul, centuries later in Galatians, looks back at this exact moment and says, aha, this is a picture of something eternal.
And here's the breakdown of that picture. On one side, you have Ishmael. He's the result of human planning, of Abraham and Sarah trying to help God out, right? He represents the flesh, our own efforts. But then you have Isaac. He's the miracle baby, the child of divine promise. He represents the Spirit, what God does all on his own.
So when Sarah says, "Get him out of here, cast out this bondwoman and her son," wow, it sounds so harsh, doesn't it? But it's highlighting a huge spiritual truth. You can't mix the two. The inheritance that comes from God's promise can't be shared with the results of our own works. It has to be one or the other.
Okay, so this spiritual principle has a very real, very human cost. And for Abraham, this moment is just gut-wrenching. It really shows us the cost of obedience.
I mean, the Bible says the whole thing was very grievous to him. This was his son, after all. We can't just gloss over the raw human emotion here. It's a powerful reminder that following God sometimes means we have to detach from things or even people that we love dearly. And man, that can hurt.
But right in the middle of Abraham's pain, God himself speaks. He essentially says, Abraham, I know this is hard, but listen to your wife. This has to happen. God confirms that this painful separation is absolutely necessary for the messianic line, for the whole redemptive plan.
So now the camera kind of pivots. We leave Abraham and we follow Hagar and her son Ishmael as they're sent out into the desolate wilderness. And this is where things get really desperate. Think about it. The water Abraham gave them was in a bottle. It's a symbol of a finite human supply. And what happens to finite supplies? They run out. This is a perfect picture of where we end up when we're disconnected from God's covenant and just relying on our own limited resources. And then we get one of the most powerful lines in the entire chapter. It says, "And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water." The key phrase there, the one that should make us all sit up a little straighter, is "opened her eyes." Now get this. The well was most likely there the whole time. It wasn't a brand new miracle. But Hagar was so consumed by her fear, her grief, her utter despair, that she was totally blind to it. Wow. It took a supernatural act of God to show her the provision that was right in front of her face.
And that just has to make you stop and ask, right? What well of provision has God already placed right next to me, but my own despair is blinding me from seeing it? It's a challenge for all of us. We have to ask God to open our spiritual eyes.
So, while Hagar is having her eyes opened out in the wilderness, the story swings back to Abraham. And what we see is that he's come through this whole family crisis with a much deeper, richer understanding of who God is.
So he makes this treaty with a local king, Abimelech. It's about securing earthly peace. But then he does something more. He plants a grove and he worships. This shows a huge leap in his spiritual maturity.
And this is huge. He calls on the Lord by a new name, El Olam, the everlasting God. You see, he's no longer just worshiping God for the things he's done, like giving him a son. He is now worshiping God for who he is, eternal, unchanging, the God of the ages. His faith has definitely leveled up.
Okay, so that's the story. An incredible journey of faith and conflict and revelation. So, what about us? How do we take all of this and actually apply it to our own lives right now?
Well, here are 4 really practical actions we can take away. First, trust God's timing. Just because it's delayed doesn't mean it's denied. Second, separate from the flesh. Make those tough choices to remove the things that hinder the spirit in your life. Third, ask God for opened eyes, just like Hagar. And finally, worship El Olam, the everlasting God, for who he is, not just for what he does for you.
So, to quickly recap, Genesis 21 teaches us that God's faithfulness is absolute, that the conflict between spirit and flesh is going to happen, that obedience can be painful but it's necessary, that God's provision is always closer than we think, we just need the eyes to see it, and that true worship comes from really knowing God's character.
And so I'll just leave you with this question to think about. As you walk through this life, are you digging those wells of peace and planting those groves of worship, all while keeping your eyes on the eternal promise? Thank you so much for joining us for this devotional, brought to you by the You Need Faith in Jesus team.